We talk about the determination, mental fitness, and grit needed to make it, not just in pro sports, but life, a lot on this show. And our guest today is a shiny example of someone who did it in both arenas. Welcome to Win, a show where we interview champions and trailblazers and ask questions to uncover and discover their championship traits for succeeding in sports, work, and life. I'm Lee Elias. That's JB Spizo, and we are joined today by a man who defied the odds in pro hockey and continues to outside of the game, Riley Cote. Riley was an undrafted player who walked onto an NHL tryout, which resulted in him taking the full road from the CHL to the ECHL to the AHL and eventually the NHL with the Philadelphia Flyers, where he became a hometown favorite almost immediately. For those of you who don't follow hockey, what Riley accomplished is extremely rare, and we cannot wait to dive into what makes him tick as an athlete and as a person. Riley, really great to have you on with us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Nice to see you guys.
That's great to see you too, man. Like I said, your journey is one that I can't wait to dive into. You took an unorthodox road to the NHL. So my first question isn't how did it make you feel to make it? I'm sure that felt great. My question is, what is it in you? What sets you apart mentally? What drove you to reach the levels that you did?
That's a really good question, and I'm still figuring this thing out. I had a conversation the other day about this, and I think specifically at the pro level, when I kind of took on the role of being a fighter, I realized I might have been fighting out of fear of failure and whatnot. But, my childhood dream was to play in the NHL. And obviously the dream was scoring 50 every year and, and all the glamour and fame that comes along with it. My route was unconventional and a little bit aggressive. But nonetheless, I was able to live my childhood dream and, was blessed to and grateful for the experience. But, I was always wired, as a competitor, as far as back as I can remember, growing up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, had the paper route at 8 years old and battling the cold Canadian winters. Just remember always wanting to be the first at everything, the first, the best, you know what I mean? So like that desire to win and compete was always there. Landed up being one of the better kids coming out of Winnipeg in the youth hockey level, and then eventually moved away from home at 16. And I realized, holy shit, like I'm a small fish in a big pond here, and I'm not as good as I thought. I'm going up against the best kids, the junior hockey players in Western Canada. But I was just so determined and driven, and not being drafted, I think I had to dig even deeper inside. Like, how bad do you want this, and what are you going to do to achieve it? And I think that's when I had to make this, this decision of like, okay, well, I'm a hockey player, but now I got to do something above and beyond just playing hockey and be more of a physical specimen.
Right. I got to comment on this too, because I want our audience to understand, a lot of people say you'll never make the NHL. Like we hear that all the time. I'm not a fan of saying that to anybody. Like my attitude is if you got a dream, you have the right to your dream. You have the right to pursue your dream, whether you make it or not. But the truth is about your journey, it's like, you don't hear about people making it from the ECHL to the NHL. And I just always found that amazing, which you just didn't stop. All right. And there's nothing wrong, I think, with athletes to get to a certain point. They're comfortable with what they've accomplished and they move on, with their lives, whatever level. But I got to reiterate, Riley, what you did is not normal. And there is a fire in you. And again, we're going to find out throughout the episode that fire didn't stop with, when you stopped playing hockey. Like you're very passionate about everything that you do. So I'm excited to dive into that today too. JB, go ahead. I just had to reiterate that because I want people to understand, how special you are.
Exactly right. That never give up attitude, Riley. Riley, great to see you again. And I'm actually you said something, we had a pre-planned question here, but part of that journey that you went on, not being drafted, talk about, not only did you have to work your way, physically, mentally, emotionally, but you had to show something in coaches and leaders that said, you know what, this is a good dude, right? This is a good guy, because you don't make it that far not being drafted unless people say, you know what, this guy has some character. This guy has some leadership, these intangibles. Talk about that. And what do you think you brought that helped you forge that path of success?
Yeah, that's one of the things I hang my hat on is being a character guy and having a good attitude. If there's two things I can remember from my childhood, it was work hard and have a good attitude, right? I mean, pretty basic, but extremely powerful if you understand how to follow those those ingredients of the formula. But I always took pride on being a good team guy, even when I was in junior hockey. I was a captain in my last year as a 19-year-old. So I felt like I had some sort of leadership qualities, obviously, but I realized, like, if I was going to play the role of the enforcer, you have to be a great guy in the locker room, and you have to earn the respect of the locker room and the coaches. And that's just, I can go back to attitude and how hard you work. There's two things you can control. And I always took pride in being the first guy at the rink and the hardest working guy, whether it was smart work or not, that's another story. But nonetheless, I was there physically putting in the work and having good attitude, and having good attitude when I wasn't in the lineup, when I was scratched, when I got my ass beat, and trying to just lead by example that way. And, not that I wasn't feeling negative emotions, but, I couldn't be a guy that would, sop around the locker room and show his emotions all day long and show I'm frustrated and angry and whatever the situation lands up being. So the character piece, yeah, 100%. I mean, I would say that was probably the variable that allowed me to move up and eventually find, myself in the NHL with the Philadelphia Flyers. And, they have a tradition built on and an organization built on, a culture of this type of attitude, right? I mean, you go from the Broad Street Bullies and traditionally, since Ed Snyder was at least involved, there was like a spirit within the Flyers, and I felt like I at least brought that. Was I the best player? Absolutely not. Was it the toughest? No, but I think there's one thing that I, again, take pride in, was being the best guy, the best teammate I could be, and it served its purpose, I guess.
No, and I think that's so important, Riley. Yes, you definitely were. You still are. I think that's so important for young athletes and young coaches to understand, like, you got to be a great human being. And just those simple fact that, you were there being a good human being as you were climbing. A coach called down below goes, "Hey, tell me about Riley." Great dude, works hard, great because as they're putting teams together, you have the stars that are going to do what they do, but when you start putting the teams together, you have to put the culture together too. Yeah. And so that's so important for young people listening to this podcast to hear your words of that. Excellent, well done, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And just to build off that, is I didn't even realize how powerful it was, and almost till I was done playing and got into coaching and realizing, like, it's so much better as a coach or an organization, or the brass of an organization, to know that you got quality humans in that locker room, because there's nothing worse than having talent that is bringing cancer into the locker room. You know what I mean? I seen on the other side of the fence. You don't really notice it when you're in the moment because there's so much going on, here and around your own performance. But once you start evaluating and being critical of other people's performance and what they're doing in and around the locker room, it's such an important piece. It's more important than the actual skill, in my opinion. Yes, you have to have skill and you have to have guys that can able to perform, but to me, the character, that chemistry is everything.
Yep, that's that intangible that teams and organizations and companies, they try to find that culture for success. Well done. Thank you, Riley.
And we should reiterate here too that, Riley, we've been blessed with a lot of great guests, including yourself on this show. One of them, Tom Rennie, CEO of Hockey Canada. We asked him, what are the 5 traits that separate pro athlete from not pro athletes? And had nothing to do with skill. Not one answer had anything to do with skill. The truth is that when you get to the pro level, you're skilled, period, right? It had to do with character, community, passion, determination, all which you brought to the Philadelphia Flyers, as you said. An organization that's built itself on toughness. I love that you brought up Ed Snyder, because since Ed Snyder's death, that team's kind of lost its way a little bit in terms of maybe their mentality, their identity, right? So I'd be remiss if I didn't even ask you about that. Obviously, Ed Snyder was a great owner, and he crafted a team that separated itself from the other teams in the league. How important is identity? Right. And you've been on a lot of teams. I'm actually going to read this. I'm going to merge these 2 questions together. All right. Every level you played at, you found success. You won a President's Cup with the Memphis River Kings with CHL. Yep. Calder Cup with the Philadelphia Phantoms, obviously. AHL. You won the Pelly Lindbergh Memorial Trophy on the Flyers, most improved player. Right. So tell me about the people that made an impact along the way, the people like an Ed Snyder that really, crafted an identity, a place for you to play. And what was the common denominator of success amongst the ranks?
Ooh, action-packed there.
That's all we bring here, Riley. Action-packed question.
Well, identity is beyond important. I mean, you have to have an identity as a as an individual, obviously, but as a team. There's no question. I think Ed Snyder did a really good job, a very obvious job at that, building out the Broad Street Bullies. And eventually, that era kind of evolves out. But historically, the Flyers have been known to be a tough team, right. Not just fighting, but tough team to play against. And I think should never go away from that. I feel like everybody should have that identity. It seems like a pretty logical one, especially in a sport like hockey. But I think since Ed Snyder passed, whether it's an actual philosophy change or it just becomes so corporate that you've lost the spirit that Ed Snyder originally, created and injected into the organization and culture itself. So I don't know how exactly that works, but I believe it's gone so corporate. You have an owner that came into the locker room and shook your hand after every game, win, lose, or draw. You know what I mean? It was like you look you in the eye, and he just showed that he cared, about his players. And I don't feel like it is the way it is. I know that's maybe separate from the conversation on as far as identity goes, but
I don't think it is. I don't think it is at all.
Having a guy like that,
yeah.
he creates that energy around a team that you want to play for because the owner cares that much about you, right? And that helps breed obviously some sort of identity and culture. But I mean, he believes in his people. And building off your question, I had a few guys in management that believed in me. John Stevens being one. He was my coach with the Phantoms, and he ended up being the coach of the Flyers. And he believed in me. I know for sure. And Paul Holmgren. I think between those two, and then Ed Snyder as well. But between Paul Holmgren and John Stevens, they knew what they're going to get out of me. They knew I was a glue guy. They knew I was an energy guy. They knew I was good in the locker room, and Homer's old school and Johnny was old school. And having two guys like that in my corner certainly helped. But I believe I helped, say I wasn't there responsible for creating the identity, but adding to the identity, because I say a throwback, especially in the Phantoms era there, and even towards the end of my NHL career, which was pretty short anyways, but like the tail end of like that era of, very distinguished teams around toughness. You don't see that a whole lot anymore, but Johnny, again, old school guy, Homer, they were still on the tail end of, say, what was left of the Broad Street Bullies, but very clear and obvious identity. And I think outside of the physical fight and the rough and tough of the Broad Street Bullies, if you talk to some of these guys, it was the culture in the locker room. They believed in each other, they had each other's back, and it was very obvious on the ice.
Yeah, I just want to last comment, JB, and we can jump to you after this too, is that, Riley, you bring up a great point for the coaches and the players listening to the show. And I always ask them, are you the type of player that Riley's talking about that wants to be part of that culture, that's going to invest in that culture? And then adversely, coaches, GMs, owners, are you looking for the players that are doing that? There's a lot of coaches who don't have the wherewithal to kind of see that, have the vision. As you said, the Flyers have kind of become a pretty corporate team. Comcast owns the team. I'm not trying to rip Comcast here, but you're right. There's no person walking in there that owns the team and that, that built the team, so those connections, in addition to having a great power play and special teams and systems, which are all very important, and the right players in the right positions, you can't win without what Riley's talking about. It's just not possible. Every team in the NHL, every team in pro sports is talented, right? Yeah. They're all talented, but the ones that win have something more. Yep. Right. And I think that's what you're talking about. Now, you got to create that. You got to find that. And then players, coaches, GM, you got to look to bring that together.
Yeah, that's the energy, the spirit you can't quantify, right? It's right. Like you want to bring all the analytics and all the data and all the stuff. Yeah, it's valuable information to pluck from, but you just can't ignore the spirit, the eye test,
the human element.
The human element. Yeah, that's something you just can't ever quantify. It's something that you have to be around to observe, to feel, and understand, and yeah, to me,
and believe in too. That's
a
lot of I use in baseball all the time. Well, he threw 100 pitches, get him out. The guy's got a no-hitter going. It's the game of his life. Yeah, he had 100 pitches, get him out. Like, yeah, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
crazy.
No, exactly. You gotta have
exactly right. In the military, Riley, that's why you always want to tell the leader of the organization, get to the battlefield. All right. You can get all this data, everything else, but until you get on the ground and you smell it, you see it, you hear it, you're part of it, you understand. Riley, so first time I met Paul Holmgren, I show up to the Flyers practice facility to get ready to do my thing. And there's this guy in the gym, slamming weights around. I'm like, who the hell's that guy? They're like, that's the GM. I'm like, oh crap. I better get my stuff together. I was like, Okay, it's, there's the gym and they're, slamming weights. I'm like, all right, it's game on. I better get ready.
Right. That sounds
Riley, I
exact.
love that after you finished playing, though, you took up coaching, and especially in the AHL. In my time working in the NHL, I did a lot of work with the AHL players, and I really feel that, it's such a developmental league to help players get to the NHL. And sometimes I feel that when the coaches are there, they're more worried about like maybe themselves instead of like taking this talented player, developing them for the big club. So I want you to talk a little bit about your experience there, and developing other human beings, and the pride you took and what you took out of that to help others.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think I spent most of my time as like a psychotherapist than I did an actual hockey coach, because
Yeah,
I feel like,
exactly.
especially at the pro level, like you said earlier, like everyone's got skill, right? Yeah, yes, you have to work on your skill and practice, but like I wasn't strength and conditioning. Yes, I was coach, and I would do extra work and stuff like that, but there's only so much you can do physically, right? It's all psychological. It's nothing more than that, right? It's an absolute mental game. So I spent more time talking with these guys and like getting out the oven mitts and like, keeping these guys, understanding of like mindset, attitude, work, just understanding the environment as a new guy that might be in a different role. You know what I mean? It's just, it's all bringing things into perspective for these guys. So I really enjoyed it, because that's kind of in the world I am now, as far as like, not that I'm a psychotherapist, but I feel like, when you're in the world of mindfulness and all that, is it lands up being the same thing. It's just kind of being honest with your situation, your surroundings. Are you doing everything in your power? Bring some awareness around your being and your behaviors, and then having these conversations. I was, the buffer zone to the head coach of guys that had issues, which they always did, about playing time or this lack of playing time. Like they would come to me, and then, and then I'd have to be honest, like, are you doing everything you can? Or you think you believe that you're actually performing on this high level that you're talking about? Whatever lands up being. But coaching was, for me, it wasn't so much the X's and O's. Yes, there was lots of video and there's, positional stuff, but the nuts and bolts of it was really the mindset. I mean, it was the psychology of managing the things you can control and being the best version of yourself.
No, because especially in the AHL, there's a lot of things out of your control as a coach and even as a player. We had a 30-goal guy in the AHL team, and the GM would never call him up, and,
Yep.
and the head coach would be like, "Hey, this is the guy," and the GM was like, "No," and.
Yep.
And you got everybody kind of campaigning for this young man to go up. He scored 30 goals in the
Yep.
AHL, and the GM was like, "No." And so sometimes that's out of your control, but you got to continue to tell that player, "Hey, listen, let's trust the process. Let's keep it going. Let's find a way." And I think that's very instrumental. And can you go into what you're doing now? Obviously, I think it's great that you're doing mindfulness. You're in this Flyers learn to play program. You're also on this Nasty Knuckles podcast, trying to help others. Talk about that development, continuing to pay it forward, which is exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, so I got a few different irons in the fire, and a lot of them are around the world of mindfulness. So between teaching yoga, meditation, breath work, I'm also into plant medicines that are supported within the package of wellness and mental wellness, and obviously used with respect and intention is the key, and that's the world I'm in. Cannabis, psilocybin mushrooms, functional mushrooms. It's all around brain regeneration, mental health, spiritual development, and they all come hand in hand, really. And then staying close, trying to stay close and in and around the hockey scene. That's where the Nasty Knuckles comes in. Is I got obviously relationships with a lot of hockey players, Flyers specifically, and so does Derek Sotomayor Nasty. So we thought between our networks, it would make sense to try and humanize players, so we're not X's and O's and talking analytics with these guys. We're trying to humanize them and talk about real life stuff, training, philosophy, mindset, how it's evolved since they were 20 to where they are now, stuff like that. Which still kind of plays into what I'm doing, because I love learning about this and psychology of guys, especially guys like JVR, who I played with back in the day, and to see him evolve the way he has around taking care of his body and mind and the whole bit. It's satisfying, it's fulfilling, but it's kind of like some ecosystem merging. But yeah, no. So I never wanted to get totally away from the hockey. I was in the corporate, coaching, corporate sports and coaching and a whole bit. I feel like, my space in this is in recovery, regeneration, and wellness, mindfulness. I think we've mastered the art of training the physical body. Like how much more can we train the physical body? How much more money and resources can we put into becoming a functional athlete? I seen it when I was coaching. The guys that don't make it is not the guys that aren't built like a Greek god or aren't athletic or not, skilled. It's the guys that can't be consistent mentally and perform consistently and up and down. Their emotions are controlling them. So to me, it's like a spiritual mindfulness issue that a lot of these guys struggle with. It's not a physical issue. It's not a lack of skill. I mean, everyone that gets to these levels has enough skill. I mean, if I could find my way to the NHL, I can absolutely guarantee that everyone's got enough skill to find their way, especially when you get turned pro. It's a mindset. So I spend most of my time, it's like, bringing perspective to people and using tools around them that, there's a lot of addiction in sport and society. There's a lot of substance abuse. There's a lot of guys misusing food, nutrition, and these are all tools that can actually help increase performance and, and the mind and flow state and all that stuff. And I think we've, somewhere along the line, we've kind of disconnected with some of these very obvious fundamentals. And we just so focused on the physical body that my whole thing is kind of reeling it all back together and taking care of the mind, the spirit on top of the physical body.
Riley, you're exactly right. And we forget that the brain is a muscle, right? Yeah. We train everything else and we forget to train the brain. And, I try to put in my 7-day routine. Sundays, I try to do a yoga day. That's my yoga day to refresh everything. I'm terrible at it, but at least I'm trying. Yeah. And part of it is you come out, you're like mentally refreshed. Yeah. And you're learning different things. And I think it's so important, especially when you have these professional athletes or professional business people, and you're like, hey, let's try something different. And, in the military, it's like yoga. Why would I do yoga? And then all of a sudden they're like, man, this is actually pretty good. Yeah. So I think it's so good. That's so good what you're doing, Riley.
Yeah, thanks. And I also want to be clear too around like yoga is like, most people think of yoga as just like the physical exercise of yoga, but yoga is really ultimately built for meditation and breathing, right? The yoga, the physical practice of yoga was almost introduced years after, true yoga, which is meditation. And to me, it's like, if you understand the mind and meditation and concentration, you're essentially you're creating your mind. You're able to create an environment for your mind to be fit for concentration. And I remember coaching Terry Murray specifically every single day, be like, God damn it, these guys can't focus, no concentration. You know what I mean? And it's like, you got to go back to consistency. You have the guys that are on the ice, they're, dicking around and not paying attention, right? Not concentrating, not focusing. And those are usually the guys that don't find their way. So it's like the meditation. I know most people like, oh, I can't sit still and, calm my mind or, and find one pointedness and all this stuff. Well, it's if you can train your mind, just like any other muscle. You mentioned it's a muscle. It's like, that's the whole point of this, is like, if you can train your mind and understand what you're accomplishing with meditation, this translates into performance on the ice. Because your mind's, you can able to be more concentrated, more focused. And then when you're in the moment, you're more present, you're more in flow. I mean, whether you're in the military or, you're working or you're you're a swimmer or you're creating a creative sport, you're trying to find flow state. And the only way to find flow state is find the present moment. Every spiritual teaching on the planet talks about this. But if you're thinking about the past and thinking about the future and all, and what if I have a bad shift and, what this and that, like, there's no way for you ever to find flow. So like, meditation, teaching that is like, it's, in my opinion, like ultra important, because we're at a phase now. Again, physical body, like how much more can we improve the physical body and performance? There's a level now. I'm not sure if we can supersede that. The mind is everything. Like the mind, if you can control that, it doesn't matter if you're working 9 to 5, working as a hockey player, whatever it lands up being, if you can control that, everything lands up being better. You perform higher on a higher level and you have more success. And I'm learning all this, like after I was quote unquote a professional hockey player. I didn't even know any of this stuff. Yeah, you hear about these taboo things and stuff like that, but to actually practice it, understand it, and live it, embody it, it's like, it's on a whole nother level. So I'm just like, I'm excited to where this thing is going. I know Major League Baseball has got some mindfulness coaches and there's a movement in this. So like the yoga, physical practice of yoga, yeah, there's prevention of injury. There's, just like recovery days, the physical practice. But to me, there's more of like, let's move with breath. because when you're moving with breath, you're present and you're focusing on what you're doing. That's a meditation. It's a mindful meditation. But most people just ignore all that, and it's just like, oh, just go stretch, and it's like, yeah, that's kind of like that's kind of like the gravy on it. Like that's not the purpose of it, you know. And I think that education around it is like, you know, again, the old school generation guys, like they just like, oh, well, that's, you know, like you said, the military guys, oh, I thought, you know, yoga, it's just like for you know, for 7-year-old women. It's like, no, I mean, it's extremely humbling, and it's not a competition, right? It's about like improving the psyche, improving the breath, and then ultimately improving the physical body. But to me, that's like the gravy above and beyond what the purpose is. So we got a lot of work to do, because I think most, you know, you guys know, you're in the space of mental wellness, mental fitness,
right?
Is that it's most guys cannot concentrate enough, focus enough, they're distracted, and that's the variable that's making them you know, not find their, you know, find their dream and find their flow.
You know, Riley, what I love about the show is it is all about mental fitness. We opened the door and you just walked right into the wheelhouse of present moment awareness, which is something that we preach here a lot. And, you know, one of the things about, you said it perfectly, about mental fitness, we know physical fitness, but we don't really know mental fitness. And I always tell young athletes, young coaches, like, if you're just pushing that aside as a side thing, it's no different than you skipping the gym for weeks at a time. It's just no different. And that's why I call it mental fitness, because people seem to understand the physical fitness and what that means.
Yep.
We need to be spending equal, if not more, time on our minds, that brain power. It's another way of saying it.
Yep.
And I love that you're bringing that up. You know, the funny thing about present moment awareness, Riley, is that's something I've been heavily involved with for like 10 years, is that the hardest part about it is actually just kind of recognizing it the first time, like understanding the voices in your head are not really real. And understanding, like you said, don't live in the past, don't live in the future, live in the present moment and focus on what you can control. Getting to that point's hard, but once you get it, man, it opens up the universe to what you're able to do. It's like when you figure the gym out the first time, like, oh, wow, man, there's so much I can do here to improve my body, become a better athlete. The same thing happens with your mind. But if we can just get over this stupid hump that exists, this stigma around it, which we're starting to do, and you're seeing it in sport, you're seeing what Simone Biles did in the Olympics. You saw what Carey Price did, right? Obviously, Robin Lehner is an advocate of this, although controversial at times. It's something that comes up, right? So the conversation is changing, and I wanted to bring this up. You mentioned this. You've been a major advocate of hemp and cannabis, and you're kind of a leader in the space now, right? You're the co-founder of Athletes for Care. It's a group that advocates athletes on the issues of health and safety, including the use of cannabis as medicine. And you're founder of Hemp Heals, the Hemp Heals Foundation, which aims to educate the public about nutritional benefits of hemp and its numerous eco-friendly industrial uses. I absolutely read that. I think you're on the Pennsylvania Hemp Industry Council. So look, this is something you're really passionate about. All right. What I love about this, and I don't think I've ever had a guest to be able to say this. You know, in Philadelphia, people always knew he's a hard worker, tough guy, right? That was your identity. And I remember when you started getting into this stuff, they immediately just started labeling, oh, pothead, right? And like, that's so far from what you're doing here. And the conversation on this recently has really changed. And I think now that it's not people look at you like that, they go, oh, wow, this guy's really involved in this space. He understands this space. So my question is, what are your hopes for the future of hemp and cannabis in sport? Because again, this is something now in society, the conversation is just totally different than it was 10 years ago. It's not a joke anymore. It's not just for like lazy stoner. You know what I mean? Like there's another stigma that needs to be broken. What are your hopes for the future of the sport? I can't reiterate this enough. Guys, Riley is extremely passionate about this. Extremely. Go ahead, Riley.
Yeah, I'd like to see it come to a point where, you know, these cannabinoids, and I think you're talking about mainly is, you know, these cannabinoids, we're talking about CBD, THC, and there's about 140 other identified cannabinoids in the cannabis plant, would be used responsibly, respectfully, and obviously scientifically for their players. That's actually passed down from the top of the organization through strength and conditioning and the medical staff and to the players. Right now, guys are using cannabis-based products, but they're on their own. They're going to buy them on their own. It's not being, governed, and, and they're not being educated through the leagues or the teams themselves. But when we talk about sports medicine, right now, we still have ancient protocols around pain management with, pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories, pharmaceutical painkillers, opioids, oxy, whatever else in between. You still have a pharmaceutical model around sleep management with Ambien and whatever else. So we need to change the models and the protocols within. This is a societal problem. The sports is just a microcosm of what's going on out there. But I think we've been fundamentally misled. We've lost so many guys to opioid and alcohol addiction, substance abuse. A lot of this mental health stuff could be avoided had we been using the proper protocols and tools in the first place. But within the locker room, I mean, CBD specifically, it's a non-psychotropic cannabinoid, meaning there's no high associated with CBD. And in fact, 139 others, like there's no high associated with them. These are about anti-inflammatory properties, neurogenesis, neuroprotectant properties. You talk about protecting the brain, managing inflammation. Like this should be something that guys are taking in the locker room. There's all these delivery systems, transdermal patches, creams, massage oils, sublinguals. So there's nothing to do with smoking herb. I mean, guys will figure that out on their own outside the locker room, which I know a lot of guys do, because there's a spiritual element and a recovery element to the herb. But I'm talking about like almost traditional, nutraceutical type delivery systems that are very effective, and most athletes are using some sort of cannabis-based product. Right. But they're figuring this out on their own. There's no guidance, there's no education from the leagues and the teams themselves. So where I like to see this is actually bring this in-house, teach these guys, responsible cannabinoid use, get them the best. You know what I mean? If this is about, bringing the best resources around your players so they can recover better, they can perform better, they can feel better, and maybe some prevention of injury stuff. Maybe you can minimize a concussion because of, having cannabinoids in their system, the neuroprotectant properties. I know the Israeli military has been using CBD for 25 years to treat PTSD and brain trauma. Right. So this should be like part of the protocol in the sports recovery protocols. And we're way off. I mean, we still in the US here, it's still a Schedule I drug. I mean, there's hemp derived CBD that's growing below 0.3% THC that falls under the Farm Bill, but federally illegal if you talk about anything above 0.3% THC, which would fall under the category of medical marijuana. Canada's full legalization, recreational and medical, but there's that international border that complicates it. So they still test for cannabis, therefore pushing guys into the direction of pharmaceuticals, specifically opioid-based painkillers. And you talk about managing pain. So we have to change the model. I mean, we have to change this model, real quickly. Just keep losing more and more people, and if they're not dead, they're suffering with, an addiction, substance abuse, and you're never able to thrive when you're hardly surviving. You know what I mean? And I think that's what we're trying to do, is give these guys legitimate tools. This is all about respect. This is like mindful cannabis use. And I think, the black market, the gray market, whatever you want to call it, recreational markets, it's been misused, misrepresented. And that's kind of what happens when there's no true guidance around, mindful, intentional, anything use. Like look at a diet, you know what I mean? It's like, just start there. It's like, we misuse food too. We misuse everything. I think it's like getting people back on track of like, Mother Nature is abundant. We need to respect Mother Nature. And that starts with diet and hydration and working outwards to these other medicinal plants that are highly effective for recovery.
I said you were passionate. You just proved it. Listen, I wanted you to give you the platform because, look, again, this is another stigma in sport. My attitude, Riley, has always been as a coach is that, look, if there's something out there legal that can assist my team, I want to look into it. And that goes from everything from what you're talking about to looking to other sports for advice. We don't do that enough. What's funny in sport, man, is if you look around at some of the greatest coaches of all time, you look at the Bulls coach in the 90s, you look at, some of these guys were really into this mindfulness attitude. I don't want to expunge upon it too much, but it's like the great teams kind of had the understanding that like we need to be together. We need to understand that. And now, again, you're uncovering it, that there is a lot of stuff out there, legal stuff, that we're barely even looking at. And that blows my mind. It blows my mind as a coach. It blows my mind as an athlete. And again, we need leaders like you in the space, which you are, to educate us on it so that, we can evolve with it. I can't wait. And JB, you like this too. I can't wait till like 30 years from now when, the young people are gonna be like, why did you guys eat so much sugar?
Yeah, I know. Right?
Like it was so bad for you. And it's the same thing like smoking in the 50s, right? Like, why'd you smoke so much?
We didn't know. Subsidize these things, you know what I mean?
Exactly
subsidize corn syrup and sugar, and it's like, this is not it's never been about public health. It's smoke and mirrors the way they present it, but
100%.
I mean, cannabis prohibition is not about public health. it was about controlling industrial resources, medicine, oil, fiber.
Absolutely right.
We're on the list of what they're protecting. The hemp plant is an amazing, versatile plant outside of medicine, right? So people need to realize that. And I think, when people say that we're living in a matrix, like we're in a program, like we have to like seriously try and step out of this thing and work our way out of this thing, because we're so conditioned to trust these traditional protocols. We still have a major heroin and opioid epidemic, and to me, the root cause of that is cannabis prohibition. Because it's like, what else are you going to use for pain management? It's like, you're going to go right to heroin. It's like, that's what it is, and that's the model we have. So we have to like snap out of it a little bit and realize what we're doing to ourselves and our communities and in society, right? It's destruction. So there's a better way, and people have been fighting for this long before I've ever been on the scene.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that people will continue to fight for, it's freedom, right? It's Mother Nature, it's plants, it's resources that we should have access to without government interference. You know what I mean? And well, there's always going to be regulations, but let people have their peace, and be able to just thrive a little bit, because right now is a stranglehold on human health, right? They want to interfere a little too much,
right?
So to kind of take that power back, and you take that back by using Mother Nature.
I love your passion with this.
No, Riley, the U.S. military's been looking at that because of the Israelis. You're right about using CBD oil for soldiers, and even like the working dogs, they're using CBD oil to even help them as well too. And you're exactly right. The problem is that there's the power's in a vacuum, and big pharma, Big pharma hopes this pandemic lasts the next 20 years, because big pharma's getting rich and rich and rich, 100 times over. The other thing is, you brought up a talk about, and it's still in the, archaic treatment times, is these concussions, right? We don't even treat these concussions, right? We put guys in a dark room, which is completely opposite of how you should do it after concussion. You should get on the bike. You should start a little bit. Okay, I'm a little bit nauseating. Okay, stop. All right. And the next day, go a little bit more. It's just like anything. If I injure my arm and I put it into a sling and I never move it, when I take the sling off, eventually my arms, I'm not going to be able to use it. It's the same thing with your brain. 100%. And I'm glad that you're out there educating people on this and trying to help people move forward on how we look at everything. That's really great. Riley, a couple of young players, couple of young coaches, trying to make it to the next level. Give them some words of advice.
Yeah, you have to learn to work with adversity. I think detaching from the outcome. I'm learning this still. Is detaching, just going about your business, putting in the work, having a good attitude, but detaching from the outcome. I know it's hard to do, because but I think if you can think like that, the work itself, it doesn't feel like as stressful, as much of a grind. But the hard work and the attitude are absolutes, no matter what. And then you kind of build, in my opinion, you build around those two things. Working smart. I was the guy that worked hard. Physically, I was so consumed with the physical body, and I ignored the mind completely. And controlling that. I think working smart is just like doing these things. Like, we can see the improvements in the physical body, but you can't see improvements of, people that are putting in a ton of, meditation, besides maybe they're calmer in crazier situations, which is an asset. So I think training the mind, and that's just work. I think working smarter, just not being so reliant on the physical body, which you absolutely have to take care of. But I think it's not ignoring this and bringing it all together, still staying true to the hard work and the attitude, being more mindful, be more mindful of energy, more mindful of stressors, whether it's people in your life. You're trying to remove the energy leaks, and the more you can identify energy leaks and patch them, fix them up, the more power you have, right? I mean, it's like the shamanism 101. It's preserving your power, and then moving forward that way without distraction. So, but it's all up here. It's awareness and it's mindfulness. And then gluing in the hard work. But to me, it's more smart work than hard work. Yes, we have to pour in the hard work, but it's more an alignment issue, I feel. So I know it's long.
Control what you can control. I love it. Thank you, Riley.
Yeah, I want to dive into something you said, Riley. Kobe Bryant said one time in the interview, he says, the hard work, when you're there before the sun comes up, you're putting the work in, and after the game, you're putting the work in. He said, that's actually the dream. And he kind of stopped on that. And I wish he had gone deeper. You just said something like that, detach from the outcome. Let's close on that, because I think that's a really important point, because, we all have our goals and our dreams and the things we want to do. Could you talk about what you mean when you say detach from the outcome?
I think the simplest way I can describe it is like, whether you make it or you don't make it, it doesn't affect your present moment and how the process looks. Because I think if you put it if you're attached to the outcome, it could be pleasure or it could be suffering, it depends on how it goes. And, somewhere in the middle. I think if you detach from the outcome, however it goes, it's the way it's supposed to go. And there's no, you stay neutral, as far as your energy goes, and the amount of suffering that you might inflict on yourself. Because a lot of disappointment, there's how many athletes try and make it to the major leagues and don't, and there's a lot of depression that comes along with it. Right. I think you can avoid that by detaching from the outcome and just being present, putting in the work, and being okay however things line up working out. Because if you do the intangibles and you put in the hard work and the smart work, I mean, you think you give yourself the best chance to succeed, right? And then work. Well, the world doesn't seem so rigid, Yeah. I think it becomes rigid when it's like you're constantly looking over, and it's like this and that, and there's in competition, you have to be aware of your competition and all that. But I think psychologically, and I'm learning this through yoga, you know what I mean? It's like living selflessly without attachment to the outcomes. And I think if you do that, you can find peace, right? And if you're more at peace with yourself, naturally, I feel like you can perform higher versus being, again, so rigid and so stressed and anxious that that seems to be what causes a lot of people to withdraw because of mental health issues.
Right.
So I think it's a way to bring, again, more calmness, more peace to the self, and then working outwards. I know it's a little bit complex, but it's kind of a spiritual comment,
enjoy the journey that you're on.
Enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey that you're on.
Riley, you know what you're making me think? Like I said, I love these shows because I learn too. Is that even the outcome, is only a moment.
It's only a moment,
right? It's only a moment. So here's another way of looking at it, right? Like you have every second of your life. You have every moment of your life. You can choose to focus on those, stay present, or you can live for one moment that will come and go, whether you make it or not.
Yep.
One of those is probably worth more than the other long term. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just to our athletes out there, last thing, and then Riley, I'll give you the last word, is that there's this kind of misconception of like, I can't do this present moment thing because it's going to take me away from my hard work. It's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. If you look at the best of all time in anything, they were very mindful. All right. Michael Jordan's a great example. If you watch Last Dance, they say it like point blank. This guy is more in the present moment than any other athlete in history at that point. Kobe, same way. I'm sure you played with guys like that. If you want to really find success, you have to look at this mental stuff. You have to look at present moment awareness. You have to understand that it doesn't matter when you get it, as long as you get it. I'm sure, Riley, you're so thankful you found it when you found it, because people live and die never finding it. They have never lived in the moment in their life. Don't allow that to be you. Riley, I'll give you the final word. Sorry. I'm passionate about this stuff too.
Yeah, 100%. You said it. There's so many people that live and die and never find the present moment. I think that is like the number one spiritual teaching of all time, is like, there is no other moment than the now. Right. So if you can understand that, your life will be better on and off the field, on and off the court, right? Everything gets better. Like if you're finding joy in the moment, then you're always successful, right? Because success isn't always just winning a championship or signing the next contract. If you're unhappy and have done that, to me, that's not true success. Right? You have to find yourself. You have to find peace within yourself. The only way to do that is to find the present moment and enjoy the process. Like you said, you pour in years and years and years. Like I pour in years and years and years of work, and then what? 24 years old, I get called up to the NHL. You know, that moment should have been like, actually, you know what I mean? It should have been like, I should have like had a festival of some sort, but it was almost like I've poured in all this work already. I feel like I've already been here. I've already experienced this somehow because I've been living it, because I've been present to, I believed in my heart that this would come, you know, I've been pouring in the moment and enjoying the time with the Phantoms and the whole bit, wherever else. But if you don't enjoy the moment, you know what I mean? And you're always thinking of, you know, the end result, like to me, you're not understanding the process, and you're never, to me, and if you want to talk about what actual success looks like, you have to be happy, and there's got to be joy in it. Otherwise, that's making money. Yeah, you got to have money to live, right. But if that's the end result or the end goal, and there's no happiness and there's no fulfillment, then I don't consider that true success.
Right. And you got to work at it too, right? Like it's just like going to the gym. You know, it's not like you snap your fingers and you're suddenly present. You have to practice this. And if you stop practicing it, guess what happens? You start to lose the ability to do it. So for those of you listening, again, first step is awareness, just getting the awareness, and then the journey of practicing it forever. And the nice part about your brain is, for the most part, that's going to stay pretty sharp for most of your life. Your body will not.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And building off that, like the science of neuroplasticity, I mean, your brain, you can always keep learning, and like mindfulness is a skill. And like any skill, there's practice involved, right? If you want to get better at anything, you got to practice. And to me, this practice is forever, as long as you want to keep your mind sharp. But as soon as you kind of like, it's like anything, you stop walking, your legs atrophy. You lay up on a bed for, 3 months straight, probably never walk again. You stop using your brain and learning new skills. That's when people age and they land up dying, right? It's like, they just like stop learning. So there's no real spiritual growth there. And you land up, if you're not growing, you're dying. So yeah, I mean, to me, this is forever. Like this process, whether you're in sport, after sport, whether you're working 9 to 5, whether you're an entrepreneur, doesn't matter what. Like to me, this ingredient is the ingredient that will keep you mindful. I mean, keep you happy, keep finding joy, and all the things that when you think about life, what it's really supposed to encompass is you got to enjoy the ride. It's like if you're not enjoying it now, you're not going to enjoy it when you actually do have success. It's just gonna, you're never fully happy and joyful. So that's what you got to find. And it's in the present moment, just enjoy it, enjoy the work, enjoy the grind, learn about yourself, have fun. It's like this, you got one physical body here, one meat suit, and take advantage of it, take care of it, because it's obviously when you're hurt and you're banged up and you got medical issues, life isn't that easy. Right. I mean, the mindfulness part isn't easy if you can't sit straight. Part of, if we talk about the physical practice of yoga at the start, like the physical practice of yoga really is to get your body in a good enough shape to sit, fit to sit. And things like, it's like, oh man, like most people can't even sit straight, let alone like, be actually healthy physically. So there's a lot there, but as an athlete, the mind, I mean, that's one thing that's ignored in my opinion from being around sports for so long and on playing and coaching. Is if you just focus these guys, if you get these guys to buy in on the mind, like sky's the limit. Mind is a powerful weapon that's underutilized in my opinion.
Well, if we haven't convinced you listening to look into this stuff, I don't know what's going to. Riley, you've been an awesome guest. I appreciate you giving us some extra time here. And like I said, you're always welcome here to talk about this stuff with us.
This is great. I love it. It's right in my wheelhouse.
Thank you, Riley. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it goes both ways. So that's going to do it for this episode of Win Championship Trades for Life for Riley Cote and JB Spizo. I'm Lee Elias. Make sure you check out our parent company, pivotalmomentsmedia.com. You can find a lot of there about mental fitness, mindfulness, and all this stuff if it's a journey you're looking to take. And Riley, where's the best place for people to find you outside the Nasty Knuckles podcast?
RileyCote.com. Got most of my stuff there. Instagram, RileyCote32. Same thing for Twitter, RileyCote32. I'm on LinkedIn. Same thing. But yeah,
take a look. He's a leader and he's passionate about what he does. So again, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Win.